the sound of gravel crunching beneath my boots, the only noise breaking the eerie silence. The truck in front of my garage was a rusted old beater, one that had no business being here, especially not at this hour. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the dark windows of the house. No lights, no movement. Laura should have been inside. She always left the light on when I was away. Something felt off. I slipped my keys back into my pocket, moving quietly toward the front door. It was ajar, the faintest crack of it swinging slightly in the wind. A cold wave of unease hit me, and my hand instinctively went to the back of my waistband, where I kept my knife. My instincts, honed from years in the Marines, screamed that I was walking into a trap. I pushed the door open gently, my eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The living room was a mess, furniture overturned, glass shattered across the floor. My breath caught as I spotted Laura in the corner, sitting in the shadows. Her face was emotionless, almost indifferent. Then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, behind me. The moment I heard those footsteps, my body tensed. They were deliberate, heavy, and too confident for someone caught off guard. I didn't turn immediately, instead letting the sound sink in. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide. My mind raced as I glanced at Laura again. She sat there, almost statuesque, her eyes hollow. There was something unsettling about her calm, something unnatural. It wasn't fear, no fear I would have recognized. This was something colder. I straightened up and slowly turned to face the source of the noise. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stood in the doorway leading to the hallway. His head was shaven, his arms crossed over his chest, revealing thick muscles lined with faded tattoos. A grin spread across his face, a grin that made my blood run cold. "Looks like the husband's home early," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. His eyes scanned me, measuring, testing, like a predator sizing up prey. I didn't move. My mind was cataloging details, calculating. He was bigger than me, no question. But size wasn't everything in a fight. "Who the hell are you?" I growled, clenching my fist to keep the rising anger in check. "Names aren't important right now," he replied, his grin widening. "What matters is that you walked into something you can't walk out of. At least not the way you came in." I took a step forward, my instincts screaming to close the distance. But that's when I noticed the glint of steel in his hand. He was holding a gun, low at his side, but still visible enough to remind me that any sudden move could end this night in a much bloodier way. "Where's the rest of your buddies?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath the surface. "They're around." He tilted his head casually as if we were having a friendly chat. "But that's not the issue here, Jack. He knew my name." "Of course he did." "The real issue is Laura. Seems your wife's been exploring other options." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My eyes flicked to Laura again. She still hadn't moved. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, avoiding mine. Betrayal swirled in my chest, hotter and sharper than the fear. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but I swallowed the anger down. Now wasn't the time. "She didn't mention anything about this to you, did she?" The man continued, enjoying every second of it. "Guess you've been kept in the dark, but don't worry, you're about to learn everything." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. This was a setup, a mind game that wanted me to react, to lose control. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction, not yet. The man took a step closer, gun still lazily dangling at his side. "You've got two options, Jack," he said, voice now deadly serious. "You can leave now and pretend none of this happened, or you can stick around and see what happens next. But I'll warn you, if you stay, things are going to get messy." "Messy how?" I asked, stalling, keeping my body loose and ready. He chuckled darkly. "Let's just say Laura's loyalty is in question. And loyalty, that's something we take very seriously." Before I could respond, the sound of another set of footsteps echoed down the hall. More company. This was just the beginning. The footsteps from the hallway grew louder, each step sending a new surge of adrenaline through my veins. I could feel the pressure building, the walls of the room closing in around me. I had to think fast. The man in front of me, the one with the gun, was still grinning like this was a game. I kept my eyes on him, but my mind was working on overdrive, calculating every possible outcome. My Marine training was kicking in, reminding me to stay calm, stay focused. If I was going to make it out of this, I needed to keep my head. Another figure emerged from the shadows of the hallway. This one was thinner, wiry, with greasy hair that hung in front of his face. He had a wild look in his eyes, the kind that told me he was unpredictable, dangerous. He carried a bat in his hand, casually swinging it like he couldn't wait to use it. He didn't say a word, just stood next to the first guy, waiting for his cue. "Meet the rest of the welcoming committee," the bald man said, motioning to his friend. "And don't worry, we're not done yet." I could feel the tension in the room thickening as another set of footsteps, lighter this time, approached from deeper in the house. A third man appeared, this one smaller and younger, with a cocky smirk plastered across his face. He wasn't armed, but the look in his eyes said he didn't need to be. They were playing this out like it was a twisted show, and I was the main act. I glanced at Laura again, my stomach turning. She still hadn't moved, hadn't said a damn word. Their silence spoke louder than anything, confirming the worst of my suspicions. She knew these men, maybe even invited them here. My gut churned with a sickening mixture of anger and disbelief, but I shoved it down. I couldn't afford to let emotions cloud my thinking. Not now. "How do you want to play this, Jack?" the bald man asked, taking a step closer, his gun glinting in the dim light. "You can be smart and walk away, or we can have some fun." I knew what kind of fun he was talking about. They weren't just here to threaten me. This was personal. It wasn't hard to figure out why. Laura. She must have gotten involved with one of these guys. Maybe more than one. The thought made my blood boil, but I kept my face neutral. "What do you want?" I asked, stalling, my eyes darting between the three of them. The wiry guy with the bat sneered, "It's not about what we want, Jack. It's about what she wanted." He pointed the bat lazily toward Laura, who still sat motionless in the corner. She made her choice. Laura's eyes finally flicked up, meeting mine for the first time since I walked into the room. There was no regret in them, no fear, just a cold, detached look. It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore. The reality of it hit me like a brick to the chest, but I didn't let it show. "She made her choice," the bald man echoed. "Now you gotta make yours." I clenched my fists, my mind racing. If I stayed, this was going to turn violent fast. But walking away wasn't an option either. These men weren't going to let me leave so easily. They had me cornered, outnumbered, and Laura was already on their side. The room felt suffocating, the weight of their eyes heavy on me. 3 men stood between me and the door, and Laura, the woman I had devoted my life to, sat there like a ghost, indifferent to the chaos unfolding around her. My heart pounded in my chest, but my mind was locked into survival mode. These guys thought they had me cornered, that I'd panic or break, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I took a step forward, squaring my shoulders. "Let's get one thing straight," I said, my voice low and calm, but filled with steel. "I'm not walking out of here until you tell me exactly what's going on." The bald leader, Vic, the one with the gun, grinned, clearly amused by my defiance. "Third guy, huh?" He lifted the gun, pointing it directly at me now, but there was no fear in me, not anymore. Anger, betrayal, those were the feelings pulsing through my veins. "Jack," he continued, his tone mockingly condescending, "this isn't a negotiation. You don't make the rules here. You've got 2 choices: walk out of this house and never look back, or," he paused, his grin turning dark, "stay and see what happens next." The wiry one with the bat stepped forward, swinging the weapon lazily like he was itching to smash it into something or someone. "I'd love to see what happens next," he sneered, eyes glinting with malice. I ignored him, keeping my focus on Vic. "Laura," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "why don't you explain? Why don't you tell me how we got here?" I needed to hear her voice to know what had driven her to this. But more than that, I needed time to assess the situation, time to figure out how I was going to get out of this alive. Laura finally stirred, lifting her head to look at me. Her expression was blank, almost cold, as if she didn't recognize me anymore. The woman I had known for years, shared a life with, was gone. The reality of it was crushing, but I couldn't dwell on it now. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. "But you were never around, Jack. You left me alone for too long." Her words felt like a knife in the gut. I'd been working, providing, trying to make our life together better. But she'd found solace in something or someone else. My gaze flicked to the 3 men standing around her. These weren't just thugs, they were connected to her, maybe even part of her new life. Vic laughed, clearly enjoying my reaction. "She's been getting what she needs from us, Jack. You're just in the way now." The rage I'd been holding back surged. I wanted to lash out, wanted to tear into all of them, but I knew better. Charging into a fight with a guy holding a gun was a quick way to end up dead. "Get to the point," I spat, my eyes burning into Vic's. "What do you want?" He cocked his head, playing with the gun in his hand. "It's simple, really. You've got an hour, Jack. 1 hour to get the hell out of here and disappear. Don't try to go to the cops. Don't come back." Or, his voice dropped, turning ice cold, "we finished this the hard way." I stood there, the ultimatum hanging in the air. 1 hour. That's all I had to decide. Run and leave everything behind, or fight back. I wasn't the type to run, but I knew if I stayed, it wouldn't just be a fight, it would be a war. The clock was ticking, but I stood my ground, locked in a silent standoff with Vic. 1 hour to leave. It wasn't an option. Running was never in my DNA, and if they thought they could scare me into disappearing, they were dead wrong. Laura's betrayal cut deep, but right now it was survival that mattered most. I wasn't walking away from this without a plan. Vic, the smug bastard, could see I wasn't backing down. His grin faltered for a second, like he hadn't expected me to stand there so calmly. The wiry guy with the bat, let's call him Skinny, shifted restlessly, the bat in his hands twitching as if he were imagining cracking my skull open. The third guy, the younger one with the cocky smile, leaned against the wall, watching, waiting for things to escalate. "Clock's ticking, Jack," Vic taunted, lifting his wrist as if to check a non-existent watch. "What's it gonna be? You got any brains in that head of yours? Or are you just gonna stand there waiting for us to put you in the ground?" I glanced briefly at Laura. Her face was unreadable, but I knew now there was no sympathy, no regret. She was already gone in more ways than one. Whatever we had, whatever trust, love, or connection existed between us had withered and died long before tonight. The realization should have crushed me, but instead, it only fueled my resolve. My training kicked in. Every instinct told me to bide my time, to wait for the right moment to strike. I needed to outsmart them, not outfight them. My eyes flicked at the gun in Vic's hand. He was holding it low, too confidently, like he didn't think I'd dare make a move. Skinny's bat wasn't going to be an issue if I could disarm Vic quickly enough. "You think I'm just going to walk out and leave you here?" I finally said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "And you think I'm going to let you have her? Let you take my life apart like this?" Vic snorted, clearly enjoying the little speech. "It's already taken apart, Jack. You're just too stubborn to admit it." It shifted my stance, subtly loosened my muscles. I was going to have one chance to make a move, and I couldn't afford to mess it up. "You got the wrong guy if you think I'm scared," I said, locking eyes with him. "I've been through worse than this. You think you and your little gang here are going to put me down that easy?" The younger guy chuckled from his spot by the wall, clearly amused by my bravado. "This one's got a death wish," he said, smirking. I ignored him, keeping my focus on Vic. I could feel the tension in the room rising, the air thick with anticipation. They were waiting for me to break, to make a mistake, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Vic's grin turned into a sneer. "I think you're the one with the wrong idea, Jack. Laura doesn't belong to you anymore. Hell, she hasn't for a long time. She made her choice, and so have we." I glanced at Laura one last time. She didn't look at me. She didn't say a word. My heart hardened. Then in a blur, I made my move. A quick sidestep toward Vic, my arm shooting out to knock a gun from his hand. And I knew I had to take him out first. He was the most dangerous. The others could wait. The room exploded into chaos, and the fight for my life began. Everything happened in a blur. My body moved before I even fully registered the decision. 1 second, I was facing down Vic, his gun Dan lazily at his side. And the next, I was lunging for him, my hand darting out like a viper. He didn't see it coming, not fully. His eyes widened in surprise, but by the time his brain caught up, it was too late. I knocked the gun from his grip with a sharp twist of my wrist, sending it clattering across the floor. The sound of metal hitting hardwood echoed in the room, and for a split second, everything froze. That's when Skinny reacted, swinging the bat with full force, aiming for my head. But I was already moving, my training kicking in like second nature. I ducked under the swing, feeling the whoosh of air as the bat sliced through where my skull had been just moments before. Skinny overextended, losing his balance, and I used the moment to drive my elbow into his ribs. He grunted, stumbling backward, the bat slipping from his fingers as he struggled to regain his footing. The younger guy, the cocky one, let out a startled curse and rushed toward me, but he was sloppy, too green to be a real threat. He telegraphed his move, throwing a wild punch in my direction, but I saw it coming from a mile away. I sidestepped, catching his arm mid-swing, and yanked him off balance. His momentum carried him straight into the wall with a satisfying thud, and he crumpled to the ground, dazed. Vic, recovering quickly from the initial shock, was already scrambling for the gun. I had to think fast. I couldn't let him get it back if he did. This was over. My heart pounded in my chest as I threw myself toward him, tackling him to the ground just as his fingers grazed the weapon. We hit the floor hard, his breath exploding from his lungs in a sharp gasp. "Get off me, you piece of," he snarled, thrashing beneath me, but I wasn't about to give him the chance to regain control. I drove my fist into his face, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone as his nose broke under the force. He howled in pain, blood pouring from his nostrils, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not until I knew he was done. Behind me, Skinny was regaining his footing, shaking off the blow to his ribs, and I knew I had seconds before he was back in the fight. I grabbed Vic by the collar, slamming his head into the floor once, twice, until his struggling stopped. He lay there dazed, groaning in pain, blood staining the floor beneath him. Skinny came at me again, this time without the bat, just raw fury in his eyes. I braced myself, but before he could reach me, something unexpected happened. Laura. She stood up, her face pale, her eyes wide with something between fear and hesitation. "Stop," she screamed, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Just stop." But it was too late for that. The room was already a battlefield, and there was no stopping now. Not until it was over. Ignoring her plea, Skinny charged at me, his fist raised. I prepared for the impact, ready to end this once and for all. Skinny's charge was wild, fueled by rage, but it made him reckless. I braced myself, calculating his movements as he closed the distance between us. His fists were clenched, and his eyes were wide with a maddened fury. He swung at me, a sloppy haymaker that was easy to read. I ducked, sidestepping his punch with a quick pivot, then landed a brutal blow to his gut. The force of it doubled him over, his breath escaping in a harsh grunt. He staggered, clutching his stomach, but I wasn't done. I grabbed the back of his neck, pulling him forward, and drove my knee into his ribs. The sickening crack of bones breaking echoed in the room. He let out a strangled cry, collapsing to the floor, gasping for air. I stood over him, breathing heavily, every muscle in my body tense. My instincts told me to finish him, to make sure he wouldn't get back up again. But there was something else gnawing at me, something far darker. I glanced at Laura, who was still standing in the corner, her face pale, her hands trembling. Her scream, her plea for everything to stop, still hung in the air like a broken echo. Laura didn't move. She just stared at me wide-eyed, as if seeing me for the first time. But it wasn't admiration or love in her gaze. No, it was something colder, fear, maybe even regret. But that didn't change anything, not now. The damage was done. Behind me, Vic groaned, trying to push himself up from the floor. His nose was broken, blood smeared across his face and shirt. He was tough, I'd give him that, but he wasn't unbeatable. I knew I could end this right here, right now. I could finish them all and walk out of this nightmare once and for all. But then Laura's voice cut through the haze of violence. "Jack, stop, please." There was again that desperate plea. She sounded weak, fragile, like the woman I'd known years ago, back when our life had been simpler before all of this. For a moment I hesitated, the rage in me faltering as I stared at her. What the hell had happened to us? How had we ended up here in this twisted, violent scene? "Stop?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Stop? After everything?" I shook my head, the anger bubbling up again. "They broke into our home. They threatened me. And you let them. You invited them into our lives." My voice cracked with disbelief. Vic groaned again, trying to stand, but I kicked him back down, pressing my boot into his chest to keep him from moving. He spat out blood, glaring up at me, but he didn't have the strength to fight anymore. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Laura whispered, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I shot her a look, cold and filled with disbelief. "What did you think was going to happen, Laura? You brought them here. You betrayed me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care anymore. Whatever love, whatever trust we once had, it was gone. Shattered. Just like the men lying broken at my feet. There was no coming back from this. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, her voice breaking. I felt a dark laugh rise in my throat. A mistake? That was putting it lightly. "Too late for that now," I muttered. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the wreckage of our lives. The chaos, the violence, the betrayal, it all came crashing down in that moment. And the only thing left to do was make the final move. Vic's gun lay a few feet away, glinting under the dim light. My choice was clear. I stared at the gun, the cold steel reflecting the dim light like a beacon, pulling my focus. It was the simplest solution, one that would end everything. No more threats, no more games. Vic was beneath my boot, struggling to breathe, blood oozing from his nose and mouth. Skinny lay crumpled a few feet away, barely conscious, gasping for air. The younger one hadn't moved since I slammed him into the wall. The room stank of sweat, blood, and fear. And Laura? She stood frozen, her face streaked with tears, shaking as if the weight of what she'd done had finally sunk in. But I didn't care about her tears anymore. She had made her choice. She had opened the door to this hell. I reached down, picking up the gun. The weight of it in my hand felt strangely satisfying. Powerful, Vic's eyes followed the movement, his bravado gone, replaced by raw fear. He knew what was coming. "Jack, don't," Laura's voice trembled behind me. It was almost a whisper, like she knew she had no right to ask anything of me anymore. "Please, don't." I turned to her, gun still in hand, the cold muzzle pointed down at Vic. "Why, Laura? Why did you do this?" I needed to hear it from her. The why. The reason. Maybe it was masochism. Maybe I just wanted to hear the truth spill from her lips. But more than anything, I wanted to know why she destroyed us. Her lips quivered as she struggled to find the words. "I was lonely, Jack. You were never here. You were always away, always somewhere else. I needed someone. I thought." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I thought they could give me something you couldn't." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. I'd already felt the betrayal. This was just the final nail in the coffin. Vic coughed beneath me, trying to shift, but the gun in my hand kept him pinned in place, its presence enough to silence any more attempts at resistance. His eyes darted between me and Laura, desperation setting in. He had been the one in control, but now he was at my mercy. "I gave you everything," I said, voice cold and steady. "Everything. And you threw it away." She sobbed, but I didn't let it sway me. I was beyond caring now. The man at my feet, the one who had thought he could take my life, my wife, my home, needed to pay. But as I tightened my grip on the gun, something in me shifted. The rage, the blinding fury that had carried me this far began to ebb, replaced by something colder, something clearer. Killing him wouldn't undo what had happened. It wouldn't fix the betrayal, wouldn't bring back the life I'd lost. It would just stain my hands with more blood. And in the end, I'd be no better than him. I lowered the gun, stepping back from Vic, whose chest heaved in relief. The other two were still incapacitated, barely moving. Laura let out a shaky breath, as if she thought the worst was over. But it wasn't. "I'm not killing him," I said, my voice low but firm. "But I'm done, Laura. With you, with all of this." Her face crumpled as the reality of my words sank in. She had thought I'd fight for her, that somehow this would end with me crawling back to her, forgiving everything. But she was wrong. I walked past her, not sparing her another glance. "You've got your life now," I said over my shoulder, cold and detached. "I hope it was worth it." I left the gun on the floor, its weight gone from my hand, but the weight of everything else, the betrayal, the violence, still pressed down on me. As I stepped out into the cold night air, the door creaking shut behind me, I realized there was no going back. The life I had, the person I'd been, it all ended tonight. And I didn't feel a damn thing.